The rifle felt heavier than anything Sarah had ever held. Morrison's custom weapon weighed nearly 20 pounds, and as she settled into the shooting position he had shown her, she could feel the precision engineered into every component. The stock was perfectly balanced, the trigger crisp and clean, and the scope was a marvel of German engineering that cost more than her car back in Texas. "Forget everything you think you know about shooting," Morrison said quietly as he knelt beside her. "At 600 meters, your target is the size of a dinner plate, but factors you never had to consider will affect where your bullet goes. Wind speed changes between here and the target. Temperature affects your powder burn. Even your heartbeat can throw off your shot." Sarah nodded, trying to absorb the flood of information while maintaining her position behind the rifle. Through the scope, the target looked impossibly small. At the hunting distances she was used to, targets seemed close enough to touch. This felt like trying to thread a needle while blindfolded. "First, let's establish your natural point of aim," Morrison instructed. "Close your eyes and let your body settle into the most comfortable position possible." Sarah followed his directions, adjusting her body until she felt completely relaxed. When she opened her eyes, the crosshairs were slightly left of the target center. "Good. That's your body telling you where it wants to point naturally. Never fight it. Instead, move your entire position until your natural aim aligns with your target." It took several adjustments, but finally Sarah achieved the perfect balance Morrison was looking for. Her breathing slowed, and she began to feel a familiar, calm settle over her. The same focused state she remembered from hunting with her father. "Now watch the wind flags," Morrison said, pointing to the small indicators placed at intervals down the range. "See how they're all moving differently? The wind near us is coming from the left at about 8 miles per hour. At 300 meters, it's stronger, maybe 12 miles per hour. Near the target, it looks calmer." Sarah studied the flags, trying to build a mental picture of the invisible forces that would affect her bullet's flight. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces kept changing. "For this first shot, I want you to aim at the center of the target and fire when you feel ready. Don't worry about hitting the bullseye. I just want to see your natural shooting form." Sarah settled behind the scope again, watching the crosshairs dance slightly with her pulse. She had learned from her father to fire between heartbeats at the natural pause in her breathing. She found that moment of stillness and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report was sharper than she expected, and the recoil was surprisingly mild despite the weapon's power. Through the scope, she saw a small puff of dust kick up from the target backstop, but she couldn't see where her bullet had hit. Morrison was studying the target through his spotting scope. After a moment, he lowered it and looked at Sarah with surprise. "That's interesting," he said. "Your shot hit about 4 inches high and 2 inches right of center. For someone who has never shot at this distance before, that's remarkable." Sarah felt a mixture of disappointment and pride. "I was hoping to hit closer to the center." Morrison shook his head. "You don't understand. Most new shooters miss the entire target on their first attempt at 600 meters. You were well within what we call the vital zone. More importantly, your shooting fundamentals are solid. Your body position, breathing, and trigger control are all natural and consistent." He made some notes in a small notebook, then continued with her lesson. "Now I'm going to adjust your scope to compensate for that high right impact. This is called dialing in your rifle. Every rifle and ammunition combination shoots differently, and we need to find where this one wants to put bullets." Morrison adjusted the scope's windage and elevation knobs, explaining each click's value as he worked. "Each click moves your point of impact a 1/4 inch at 100 meters. At 600 meters, each click moves your impact about 1.5 inches. Sarah fired 4 more shots under Morrison's guidance, with him making small adjustments between each round. By the 5th shot, she had achieved something that impressed even the veteran instructor: a perfect center hit. "Outstanding," Morrison said, genuinely pleased. "You've just demonstrated better learning ability than recruits with months of training." But he wasn't finished with her yet. "Let's move back to 800 meters. The 800-meter range presented new challenges. The target looked even smaller through the scope, and Morrison explained that bullet drop became much more significant at this distance. He also introduced Sarah to the concept of reading mirage, the heat shimmer that could reveal wind conditions. between the shooter and target. See how the mirage is boiling straight up about halfway to the target? Morrison pointed out through his spotting scope. That tells us the wind has died down in that area. But look closer to the target. See the mirage leaning to the right? There's a crosswind there we'll have to account for. Sarah's first shot at 800 meters missed the target entirely, hitting the dirt berm behind it. She felt a flush of embarrassment, but Morrison seemed unconcerned. Perfectly normal, he assured her. The bullet drop at this distance is over 6 feet compared to your zero range. I needed to see where your natural hold would place the shot before I could make the proper adjustments. After Morrison's corrections, Sarah's shooting improved dramatically. Her next 4 shots formed a group that would have been respectable for an experienced marksman, but more than her accuracy, Morrison was impressed by her attitude and learning ability. You have something that can't be taught, he told her as they packed up the equipment. Natural shooting ability combined with the temperament for precision. Work. Most people get frustrated or excited and lose their focus. You stay calm and methodical. Sarah helped him carry the equipment back to the armory, her mind buzzing with everything she had learned. The complexity of long-distance shooting was far beyond what she had imagined, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt energized. Would it be possible to do this again? She asked as Morrison locked away his rifle. Morrison considered her question carefully. What you've shown me today suggests you could be capable of much more than collecting shell casings. Have you ever considered applying for sniper training? Sarah's heart jumped. Do you think I could qualify? The military is always looking for people with natural ability, especially those who can think analytically under pressure. Your background gives you a good foundation, and today proved you have the instincts for this work. Morrison handed her a business card. There's a selection course starting in 6 weeks. If you're serious about this, I can put in a recommendation. But understand, it will be the most challenging thing you've ever attempted. The physical demands are brutal. The mental pressure is constant and the failure rate is over 70%. Sarah looked at the card, then back at Morrison. What would I be getting myself into? The opportunity to join one of the most elite communities in the military. But more than that, you'd be pushing the boundaries of what's considered possible. In precision shooting, there are distances and challenges that we're only beginning to explore. As Sarah walked home that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change dramatically. The taste of precision shooting had awakened something in her that she hadn't even known existed. For the first time since leaving her father's ranch, she felt like she had found something she was truly meant to do. 6 weeks later, Sarah found herself standing in a line with 37 other candidates at the beginning of the most demanding course in military precision shooting. The International Sniper Selection Program attracted applicants from around the world, but only a handful would survive the 8-week ordeal ahead. The other candidates were impressive and intimidating in equal measure. Most were military veterans with combat experience, police SWAT officers, or competitive shooters. With years of training, Sarah felt like an outsider among them, but Morrison's recommendation had earned her a spot, and she was determined not to waste the opportunity. The course began before dawn each day with physical training that pushed every candidate to their limits. Sarah's ranch background had given her a solid foundation of fitness, but nothing had prepared her for the military-style conditioning. Obstacle courses with full gear, long-distance runs in combat boots, and strength exercises designed to simulate the physical demands of extended missions tested everyone's resolve. What separated the sniper course from regular military training was the added complexity of mental challenges. Candidates had to perform precision tasks while exhausted, solve mathematical problems under time pressure, and demonstrate perfect attention to detail even when their bodies were screaming for rest. By the end of the first week, 5 candidates had withdrawn or been dismissed. Sarah was struggling with some aspects of the physical training, but her performance on the shooting ranges was exceptional. She consistently outshot candidates with years more experience, and the instructors began to take notice. The second week introduced advanced ballistics and meteorology. Sarah discovered that successful long-distance shooting required understanding atmospheric pressure, humidity, temperature gradients, and dozens of other environmental factors. Each morning began with detailed weather analysis, and candidates had to demonstrate they could calculate precise firing solutions under various conditions. At extreme distances, explained Chief Instructor Williams, a 5-degree temperature change can mean the difference between a hit and a complete miss. Your bullet might travel for 3 or 4 seconds before reaching the target. In that time, conditions can change multiple times along the bullet's path. Sarah found herself fascinated by the scientific complexity of the discipline. Her father's engineering background had given her a foundation in mathematics and physics that served her well when calculating trajectory tables and wind deflection formulas. While other candidates struggled with the technical aspects, Sarah thrived. The third week brought camouflage and concealment training. Candidates learned to disappear completely into their surroundings, remaining motionless for hours while observers tried to locate them. Sarah's hunting experience proved valuable here, as she understood instinctively how to use natural terrain and vegetation to break up her outline. During one exercise, Sarah remained hidden in a small copse of trees for 6 hours while instructors with binoculars systematically searched the area. When they finally called the exercise complete, she had been the only candidate they failed to spot. Impressive fieldcraft, Williams told her afterward. Natural concealment skills like that usually take years to develop. The fourth week focused on stalking and observation. Candidates had to approach within 200 meters of observer positions without being detected, then remain hidden while gathering intelligence information. The exercise combined every skill they had learned: physical fitness, patience, camouflage, and the ability to move silently across difficult terrain. Sarah's farm background helped her again. She had spent countless hours moving through brush and woodland while hunting, learning to step around dry leaves and avoid snapping twigs. What took other candidates hours to accomplish, she completed in a fraction of the time. But it was during the 5th week that Sarah truly distinguished herself. The advanced marksmanship phase introduced shooting at distances beyond anything most of the candidates had attempted. Starting at 1,000 meters, they worked their way up to increasingly challenging ranges. At 200 meters, Sarah achieved something that surprised even the veteran instructors. Shooting in difficult wind conditions, she placed 5 consecutive shots within a 4-inch circle, a level of precision that some experienced snipers never achieved. Morrison, who had been observing her progress throughout the course, approached her after the exercise. "That was extraordinary shooting. I've seen professional snipers with years of experience struggle to achieve that kind of consistency at those distances." Sarah was pleased but not satisfied. The conditions weren't that difficult once you learn to read the wind patterns. "There's a natural funnel effect in the valley that creates predictable air currents." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "You figured that out on your own?" "It's similar to what happens on our ranch when wind moves through the canyon systems. Once you understand the geography, the wind becomes more predictable." This ability to analyze and adapt to conditions quickly became Sarah's signature strength. While other candidates relied on standard formulas and procedures, Sarah could read environmental conditions intuitively and make adjustments that seemed almost magical to those watching. The 6th week introduced team exercises and advanced tactical scenarios. Candidates worked in pairs, with one acting as the spotter while the other took the shot. Communication and trust became crucial as distances increased and conditions became more challenging. Sarah was paired with David Chen, a former police sniper from Hong Kong. Chen was methodical and precise, qualities that complemented Sarah's intuitive approach perfectly. Together, they achieved consistently superior results, often outperforming teams with much more experience. "She sees things the rest of us miss," Chen told the instructors during a debrief. "Wind patterns, mirage effects, even small changes in light that affect target visibility. It's like she can feel what the bullet needs before it leaves the rifle." The 7th week, only 12 candidates remained from the original 38. The physical and mental demands had eliminated most of the field, but those who survived had developed into an elite group capable of extraordinary precision shooting. The final week culminated in a comprehensive test that combined all skills learned during the course. Candidates had to demonstrate shooting proficiency at multiple distances, under various conditions, while maintaining perfect camouflage and concealment. The maximum distance for the final test was 1,800 meters, farther than most military snipers ever attempted operational shots. Sarah's performance during the final exam was nothing short of remarkable. She achieved perfect scores on every shooting exercise, demonstrated flawless fieldcraft during stalking exercises, and showed tactical knowledge that impressed even the most senior instructors. When the results were announced, Sarah had not only passed the course but had achieved the highest overall score in the program's 15-year history. Of the 12 candidates who completed the course, she ranked first in marksmanship, first in fieldcraft, and second only in physical fitness. Williams approached her after the graduation ceremony. "Miss Martinez, your performance over the past 8 weeks has been exceptional. We'd like to offer you a position as an instructor trainee with the opportunity to work with our advanced research program." Sarah felt a surge of pride and excitement. What would that involve? "We're exploring the limits of precision shooting at extreme distances. Current military doctrine considers 1,500 meters the practical limit for most operations, but new technology and techniques suggest we might be able to extend that significantly." Williams paused, studying Sarah's expression. "How would you feel about attempting shots at distances no one has ever tried before? We're talking about pushing the boundaries of what's physically possible." Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her from collecting shell casings to graduating at the top of one of the world's most demanding courses. The little girl who had learned to shoot tin cans on her father's ranch was about to enter territory that existed at the very edge of human capability. "When do we start?" she asked. The advanced research facility was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Located in a remote valley in northern Scotland, the experimental range stretched across miles of highland terrain, with target positions marked out to distances that seemed almost theoretical. The longest established target sat at 3,500 meters over 2 miles away, but the range continued even beyond that. Sarah's new role as instructor trainee came with unique privileges and responsibilities. She worked directly with Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a ballistics physicist who was leading research into extreme distance precision shooting. Dr. Harper had spent years developing new ammunition designs, advanced optics systems, and mathematical models that could predict bullet behavior at distances where traditional ballistics calculations became unreliable. At extreme distances, Dr. Harper explained during Sarah's first briefing, everything changes. The Coriolis effect becomes significant. Air density variations along the bullet's path create unpredictable results, and even tiny imperfections in ammunition can cause massive deviations. The research program used custom-built rifles that cost more than most people's homes. These weapons were engineered to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, with barrel harmonics tuned to perfection and actions so precise they seemed more like laboratory instruments than military equipment. Sarah's first assignment was to establish baseline accuracy standards at conventional long distances, working with distances from 1,500 to 2,000 meters. She spent weeks learning to achieve consistency that would serve as a foundation for pushing into uncharted territory. The work was painstakingly methodical. Each shot required extensive preparation, with environmental conditions measured and recorded in detail. Wind speed and direction were monitored at multiple points along the bullet's flight path using an array of weather sensors. Temperature and humidity were tracked continuously, and even atmospheric pressure changes were factored into firing calculations. Sarah discovered that shooting at these distances required a completely different mindset from anything she had experienced before. At 2,000 meters, her bullet would be in flight for nearly 3 seconds, traveling in a high arc that carried it hundreds of feet above the line of sight. During those 3 seconds, any change in wind conditions could push the bullet several feet off course. "It's like trying to predict the future," Sarah told Morrison during one of his visits to observe her progress. "You're not shooting at where conditions are now, but at where they'll be when the bullet arrives." Morrison watched through a spotting scope as Sarah prepared for a shot at 2,200 meters. The target was barely visible even through high-powered optics, appearing as a tiny speck against the hillside backdrop. Sarah's preparation ritual had evolved into something approaching art. She studied wind indicators for several minutes, watching grass movement, cloud shadows, and even the behavior of birds in the air. Her weather instruments provided precise data, but she had learned to trust her instincts about conditions that couldn't be measured by machines. "Wind is steady at 8 miles per hour from the left at my position," she murmured, more to herself than to Morrison. "But there's a thermal current rising from that rocky area at 200 meters. It should push the bullet right about 2 feet if I time this correctly." She settled behind the massive rifle, adjusting her position until her natural point of aim aligned perfectly with the distant target. Through her scope, the crosshair seemed to dance with her pulse, but she had learned to find the moments of perfect stillness that existed between heartbeats. The shot, when it came, was perfectly executed. Even Morrison, with his decades of experience, felt a thrill watching the technique Sarah had developed. Her trigger control was so smooth that the rifle barely moved when it fired, and her follow-through was textbook perfect. 3 seconds later, a tiny puff of dust kicked up, directly behind the target, indicating a center hit. "Remarkable," Morrison breathed. "I've never seen shooting like this." But Dr. Harper was already thinking beyond what Sarah had just accomplished. "That's the kind of consistency we need to push further. Are you ready to try something that no one has ever done before?" Sarah looked up from her rifle, intrigued. "How much further?" "The theoretical maximum range for this rifle and ammunition combination is around 4,000 meters. The bullet will still have sufficient energy to be effective, but no one knows if it's possible to achieve accuracy at that distance." The idea was both exciting and daunting. At 4,000 meters, nearly 2.5 miles, Sarah's bullet would be in flight for over 4 seconds. The challenges would be exponentially greater than anything she had faced before. Preparation for the 4,000-meter attempt took weeks. Dr. Harper's team installed additional weather monitoring equipment along the entire length of the range. Computer models were developed to predict bullet behavior under various conditions, and new target systems were designed to provide feedback at the extreme distance. The rifle itself required modifications. The scope was upgraded to provide greater magnification, and the barrel was replaced with an even heavier profile designed specifically for extreme distance work. The ammunition was custom loaded to exact specifications, with each cartridge individually weighed and measured. Sarah spent hours in training, working on techniques for managing the extended time requirements of extreme distance shooting. At Kaker, 4,000 meters, environmental conditions could change significantly during the time her bullet was in flight. She had to learn to predict not just current conditions, but how those conditions would evolve over the next 4 seconds. The first attempt at 4,000 meters was scheduled for a calm morning, when weather conditions were predicted to be most stable. Sarah arrived at the range before dawn, spending time studying the terrain and getting a feel for the subtle air movements that would affect her shot. The target at 4,000 meters was barely visible even through the most powerful spotting scopes. It appeared as nothing more than a tiny dot against the distant hillside, requiring perfect optical conditions just to see clearly. Sarah's preparation took over an hour. Every environmental factor had to be measured and calculated multiple times to ensure accuracy. The slightest error in wind reading or distance estimation would result in a miss by many feet. When she finally settled behind the rifle, Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was the moment she had been working toward since that first day when Morrison challenged her to try precision shooting. All her training, all her natural ability, and all her hard-won experience had led to this attempt at something no one had ever achieved. Through her scope, the distant target wavered slightly in the mirage, but Sarah had learned to read these visual distortions as information about atmospheric conditions. She made final adjustments to her scope settings and found her natural point of aim. The shot felt perfect the moment she fired it. The rifle recoiled smoothly and Sarah maintained her position behind the scope, watching for the impact that would come several seconds later. 4.5 seconds after the shot, a small dust cloud appeared near the base of the distant target. Sarah's heart sank slightly, thinking she had missed, but Morrison's voice came through her headset with excitement. "Hit! Dead center hit!" Through the high-powered spotting scope, the impact was clearly visible. Sarah had achieved something that military experts had considered impossible: an accurate shot at 4,000 meters. Dr. Harper was already planning the next phase of their research as they celebrated Sarah's achievement. If 4,000 meters is possible, we need to find out what the absolute limit really is. Sarah looked out across the range toward even more distant targets that had never been attempted. She was no longer just a remarkable shooter. She had become a pioneer exploring the very edges of what was possible with precision firearms. The journey that began with collecting shell casings had brought her to the forefront of military technology and human capability. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Sarah Martinez walked slowly between the shooting positions. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel as she bent down to collect the brass shell casings scattered across the range. This had been her job for 3 months now, ever since she joined the support staff at the remote British training facility in Scotland. Sarah was 24 years old and had grown up on a farm in rural Texas. Her father taught her to shoot when she was 12, starting with tin cans in the backyard and eventually moving to hunting deer and wild boar. She was naturally good with a rifle, but life had taken her in a different direction. After high school, she worked various jobs before deciding to join the military support services, hoping for steady work and a chance to travel. The training facility where she worked was unlike anything she had ever seen. Elite snipers from around the world came here to train and test new equipment. Sarah watched them from a distance as she performed her duties, fascinated by their precision and discipline. She had always been curious about long-distance shooting, but these professionals operated on a completely different level. As she gathered the empty casings from the 800-meter range, Sarah noticed the careful patterns left behind by the shooters. Each position told a story of hours spent in perfect stillness, breathing controlled, fingers steady on triggers worth more than most people's cars. The rifles these snipers used were works of art, custom-built machines capable of incredible accuracy at distances that seemed impossible. During her lunch breaks, Sarah often sat on a hill overlooking the longer ranges, watching through binoculars as the advanced students practiced their craft. She observed how they prepared their positions, how they calculated wind speed and direction, and how they adjusted their scopes for different distances. The longest range at the facility stretched to 2,500 meters, where only the most experienced snipers were allowed to shoot. One particular sniper caught her attention more than the others. His name was James Morrison, a veteran British instructor with 20 years of experience. Morrison had served in Afghanistan and Iraq, with confirmed kills at distances that most people would consider impossible. He was known for his unconventional training methods and his ability to spot natural talent in unlikely places. Sarah had been collecting casings near the 1,200-meter range when Morrison first spoke to her. She was examining a particularly well-grouped set of brass casings when she heard his distinctive British accent behind her. "Those are mine," he said, gesturing to the casings in her hand. 5 shots, all within a 6-inch circle. Not bad for an old man with tired eyes. Sarah looked up, startled. She had never spoken directly to any of the instructors before. "Sorry, sir. I was just doing my job." Morrison studied her with sharp gray eyes. "You seem interested in more than just collecting brass. I've noticed you watching from the hill during lunch." Sarah felt her cheeks redden. "I hope that's okay. I grew up shooting and I've never seen anything like what you all do here." "Where did you grow up shooting?" Morrison asked, his tone becoming more conversational. "Texas, sir. My father taught me on our ranch. We hunted mostly, but I could usually hit what I aimed at." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "What's the longest shot you've ever made?" Sarah hesitated. "About 400 meters on a deer. But that was with my father's old hunting rifle, nothing like what you use here." Something in Morrison's expression changed. He had trained hundreds of snipers over the years, and he had developed an instinct for recognizing potential. There was something about the way Sarah spoke about shooting, the careful precision in her words that caught his attention. "Would you like to see one of these rifles up close?" Morrison offered. Sarah's eyes widened. "Really? That would be amazing." Morrison led her to his shooting position, where his custom rifle lay on a bipod. The weapon was a thing of beauty, with a heavy barrel, advanced optics, and modifications that Sarah could only guess at. He explained the basics of long-distance shooting, how factors like wind, humidity, and even the rotation of the earth affected bullet trajectory at extreme ranges. As he spoke, Sarah asked intelligent questions that surprised him. She understood concepts that took most students weeks to grasp. When he mentioned wind deflection, she nodded and asked about temperature effects on powder burn rates. When he explained scope adjustments, she inquired about the mathematics behind the calculations. You know more than you let on, Morrison observed. Sarah shrugged. My father was an engineer before he became a rancher. He taught me to think about shooting as a physics problem. Morrison made a decision that would change both of their lives. Tomorrow is Saturday. The range is closed for regular training. Would you like to try shooting one of these rifles? Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Are you serious? Would I be allowed? I'm the senior instructor here. I can arrange a private session. But I should warn you, shooting at long distances is nothing like hunting deer at 400 meters. It requires patience, discipline, and mental toughness that most people don't possess. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I'd like to try. Morrison smiled, for the first time since they had started talking. Be here at 800 tomorrow. Wear comfortable clothes and bring gloves if you have them. We'll start at 600 meters and see how you do. As Sarah walked home that evening, her mind raced with excitement and nervousness. She had always wondered if her natural shooting ability could translate to the extreme precision required for long-distance work. Tomorrow, she would find out. The next morning arrived with typical Scottish weather, overcast and windy. Sarah arrived, at the range 15 minutes early, her stomach tight with anticipation. Morrison was already there, setting up equipment on the 600-meter range. Ready to see what you're made of? He asked as she approached. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. She was about to take her first step into a world where millimeters mattered, and patience was measured in hours. She had no idea that this moment would eventually lead to her breaking records and redefining what was considered possible in the art of precision shooting. News of Sarah's 4,000-meter success spread quickly through the international military community. Expert marksmen from around the world began arriving at the Scottish facility to witness what many had thought impossible. Among them was Colonel Marcus Webb, a decorated sniper from the Canadian Armed Forces, who had held the previous unofficial record for extreme distance shooting. Webb was skeptical when he first met Sarah. He had spent 30 years in special operations and had never seen anyone achieve consistent accuracy beyond 3,200 meters. One lucky shot doesn't make a record, he told Dr. Harper bluntly. At these distances, there are too many variables for reliable shooting. Sarah understood his doubt. The shooting community was filled with stories of remarkable single shots that could never be repeated. True mastery required consistency, and at 4,000 meters, the margin for error was measured in fractions of inches in her calculations and dozens of feet at the target. He's right, Sarah told Morrison after meeting Webb. One shot proves nothing. We need to demonstrate that 4,000 meters is achievable consistently, not just once under perfect conditions, Morrison agreed. Dr. Harper has arranged for a formal demonstration. 5 shots at 4,000 meters with international observers in measured conditions. If you can put 3 of 5 shots into the target zone, it will establish a new standard for what's possible. The pressure was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Military officers, weapons manufacturers, and ballistics experts from 12 countries were coming to witness her attempt. The implications went far beyond personal achievement. Success could revolutionize long-range reconnaissance and engagement. Capabilities for military forces worldwide. Sarah spent 2 weeks in intensive preparation. Every aspect of her technique was analyzed and refined. Dr. Harper's team developed new methods for predicting wind conditions over the extended range, using atmospheric modeling techniques borrowed from meteorology and aerospace engineering. The rifle underwent final modifications with every component tested and retested for perfection. The barrel was broken in with hundreds of rounds to ensure complete stability. The scope was calibrated using laser interferometry for absolute precision. Even the ammunition was subjected to X-ray analysis to ensure perfect consistency. 3 days before the demonstration, Sarah achieved something that surprised even herself. During a practice session, she fired 5 consecutive shots at 4,000 meters and placed all 5 within a 2-foot circle. The grouping was tighter than most military snipers achieved at 1,000 meters. Colonel Webb witnessed the practice session and immediately changed his assessment. "That's not luck," he admitted to Morrison. "That's skill at a level I've never seen before." The day of the official demonstration dawned clear and calm, with ideal conditions for extreme distance shooting. Representatives from military organizations worldwide gathered on the observation platform, equipped with high-powered spotting equipment to verify each shot. Sarah's preparation began 2 hours before the actual shooting was scheduled to start. Environmental conditions were measured and recorded every 15 minutes, with wind patterns tracked using helium balloons released at regular intervals along the range. The target at 4,000 meters had been redesigned for the demonstration. Instead of a standard bullseye, it consisted of concentric circles that would allow precise measurement of shot placement. The center circle, equivalent to a vital zone hit, measured 18 inches in diameter. When Sarah finally approached the firing line, she carried with her the accumulated knowledge and experience of her remarkable journey. The young woman who had collected shell casings less than 2 years earlier was now attempting to establish new boundaries for human precision shooting capability. Her first shot was perfect in execution, but affected by a wind condition that hadn't shown up on any of the monitoring equipment. The bullet impacted 2 feet low and 6 inches left of center, outside the target zone but close enough to demonstrate the potential for success. The second shot incorporated lessons learned from the first. Sarah adjusted for the unexpected wind pattern and achieved a hit just outside the center circle, well within the acceptable zone. Her third shot was the one that made history. Fighting through increasing wind conditions and growing fatigue from the intense concentration required, Sarah achieved a perfect center hit that drew spontaneous applause from the international observers. The fourth shot was affected by a sudden gust of wind that appeared just as the bullet reached the halfway point of its flight. Despite the challenging conditions, the shot still impacted within the target zone, though not with the precision of the third shot. For her fifth and final shot, Sarah faced the most difficult conditions of the day. Wind speeds had increased, and afternoon thermals were creating unpredictable air currents along the bullet's path. The pressure was immense, with the eyes of the world's shooting experts focused on her performance. Sarah took extra time with her preparation, studying wind indicators and carefully calculating the complex ballistic solution required. When she finally fired, even she wasn't certain the shot would find its mark. The bullet's flight time of 4.3 seconds seemed to last forever. When the impact finally occurred, it was another center hit, completing a demonstration that established Sarah as the world's most capable extreme-distance marksman. Colonel Webb was the first to congratulate her. 4 hits out of 5 at 4,000 meters, with 2 perfect center shots. That's not just a new record, it's a redefinition of what's possible. But even as the international